Hi, this is John Kassir, the voice of the Crypt Keeper. And you're watching the horror show.
So now that the Super Bowl has come and gone, the biggest thing I think we all can take away from it is that, of course, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark is being adapted into a feature-length film being produced by Guillermo del Toro and directed by André Øvredal. Now, this book is, well, these books, I should say, are a pivotal portion of many a people in my generation's childhood. This is the first, in a lot of cases, experience in scariness for some of us. A, some of us for reading material, and B, some of us just overall had never been, privy to horror movies and thus was introduced to the genre via these books. These books being, of course, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, More Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, and Scary Stories 3, More Tales to Chill Your Bones. So these were all books that were illustrated by Stephen Gammell. I believe that's the original illustrator. I know at some point there were... so these are collected from folklore and retold by Alvin Schwartz. And I know that at one point they did a collection that didn't have the original artwork. I believe this is the original artwork because it all rings a very unnatural bell for me. But if you guys didn't know, those 4 teasers that they released during the Super Bowl that we did a reaction to here on the channel, they were all in these books. Now, when I tried to do research for this episode, I was interested to find out that so far we only know of 4 stories. Now, the movie itself is actually not an anthology like we originally thought. This is actually just a 1-story movie that is basically on IMDb. It says, teens band together to solve the mystery of macabre deaths in their small town. To be released August 9th, 2019. A story by Alvin Schwartz, the person that told these originally. Adapted from Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Screenplay by Guillermo del Toro, Marcus Dunstan, Patrick Melton, Kevin Hageman, and Dan Hageman. So, I don't know, having that many writers isn't always the greatest thing, but that is the story of the movie. So what they're actually doing is taking a number of tales from these books and folding them into that overall story. So it's not anthological, which makes sense because when I started to look at these stories to read, they are very, very short stories for the most part. Not all the stories in these books are that short, but these particular ones are quite short. So these could simply be vignettes in this larger movie that we are going to be getting. So we're going to get into them all. Now, just so you guys know, the 4 stories are The Big Toe, and then a story called Harold, and then another story called The Dream, and finally the last story is called The Red Spot. Now, the interesting thing about these is that first story, The Big Toe, is in Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, the first book. All 3 of the others that we have seen so far in teasers were from Scary Stories 3, More Tales to Chill Your Bones. None of the stories we've seen so far have been from just More Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. So it's interesting that only 1 of the stories from book 1, but 3 of the stories from book 3 are the ones that are being marketed right now. We all have different stories that we hung our hats on that resonated the most with us, but we're going to get into all of them. So we're going to begin with The Big Toe. Now, this one is, as I said, in Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, and one of the interesting things when I looked in this massive Treasury edition is at the end of it, there is an alternate ending. So I'm going to go ahead and read the original story, and then I'll read the alternate ending for you guys. I didn't even know that existed. Believe it or not, this is the first time I'm actually flipping through this book, even though I bought it years ago. I knew I loved the Scary Stories book, and I knew at some point I'd want to go back to them. Didn't even know that I was going to have a YouTube channel at the time, but here we are. So there you go. The way the world works is interesting. So I'm going to read this first story right now. This is called The Big Toe, and I will show you guys the artwork here, but I will, of course, put it up digitally as well, just in case this doesn't show that great. But yeah, so here we go. A boy was digging at the edge of the garden when he saw a big toe. He tried to pick it up, but it was stuck to something. So he gave it a good hard jerk, and it came off in his hand. Then he heard something groan and scamper away. The boy took the toe into the kitchen and showed it to his mother. "It looks nice and plump," she said. "I'll put it in the soup, and we'll have it for supper." That night, his father carved the toe into 3 pieces, and they each had a piece. Then they did the dishes, and when it got dark, they went to bed. The boy fell asleep almost at once, but in the middle of the night, a sound awakened him. It was something out in the street. It was a voice, and it was calling to him.
"Where is my toe?"
It groaned. When the boy heard that, he got very scared, but he thought, "It doesn't know where I am. It never will find me." Then he heard the voice once more, only now it was closer.
"Where is my toe?"
It groaned. The boy pulled the blankets over his head and closed his eyes. "I'll go to sleep," he thought. "When I wake up, it will be gone." But soon he heard the back door open, and again he heard the voice.
"Where is my toe?"
It groaned. Then the boy heard footsteps move through the kitchen, into the dining room, into the living room, into the front hall. Then slowly they climbed the stairs. Closer and closer they came. Soon they were in the upstairs hall. Now they were outside his door.
"Where is my toe?"
The voice groaned. His door opened. Shaking with fear, he listened as the footsteps slowly moved through the dark toward his bed. Then they stopped.
"Where is my toe?"
The voice groaned.
"You've got it!"
All right, that's it for the big toe. Now for the alternate ending, okay? So this is listed as the alternate ending. The big toe also has another ending. When the boy hears the voice calling for its toe, he finds a strange-looking creature up in the chimney. The boy is so frightened he can't move. He just stands there and stares at it. Finally, he asks, "What you got such big eyes for?" And the creature answers,
"To look you through and through."
"What you got such big claws for?"
"To scratch up your grave."
"What you got such a big mouth for?"
"To swallow you whole."
"What you got such sharp teeth for?"
"To chomp your bones."
So that's how the alternate ending is. Huh. Interesting. All right. I don't know. I think I prefer the first one, honestly. But that's what it is. So my overall thoughts on this one, though, it was a scary story back then for sure, but it was more of a scary story that was meant to be told like around a campfire, and you jump at the person next to you when you say, "You've got it," you know, or you know, in the alternate stories case, that's when you leap at them and go, "To chomp your bones," You know, you do that in a campfire setting, and it makes the story scarier. But I did like this one. You know, I don't know why he'd take the toe, even if he was a little kid and didn't know better. I mean, why would you just take the toe? But then, how did something scamper away if the thing was buried under the dirt? I don't know. There's some questions about the big toe, but it could still be unnerving. The whole something is closing in and all you can do is sit there and wait under the covers like a girl with a dinosaur coming after her in Fallen Kingdom. That's all I'm saying about that. So it'll still be a good little vignette for the movie, though. I will say that. All right, so next up we're going to do Harold. So Harold is, I think, the longest of the bunch. So here we go. I'm going to jump right into it here. And this is the one with the scarecrow-like kind of guy there. So, I don't know. I can't remember what this one was like. So here we go. Let's do this. When it got hot in the valley, Thomas and Alfred drove their cows up to a cool green pasture in the mountains to graze. Usually they stayed there with the cows for 2 months. Then they brought them down to the valley again. The work was easy enough, but oh, it was boring. All day, the two men tended to their cows. At night, they went back to the tiny hut where they lived. They ate supper and worked in the garden and went to sleep. It was always the same. Then Thomas had an idea that changed everything. "Let's make a doll the size of a man," he said. "It would be fun to make, and we could put it in the garden to scare away the birds." "It should look like Harold," Alfred said. Harold was a farmer they both hated. They made the doll out of old sacks stuffed with straw. They gave it a pointy nose like Harold's and tiny eyes like his. Then they added dark hair and a twisted frown. Of course, they also gave it Harold's name. Each morning on their way to the pasture, they tied Harold to a pole in the garden to scare away the birds. Each night they brought him inside so that he wouldn't get ruined if it rained. When they were feeling playful, they would talk to him. One of them might say, "How are the vegetables growing today, Harold?" Then the other, making believe he was Harold, would answer in a crazy voice, "Very slowly." They both would laugh, but not Harold. When something went wrong, they took it out on Harold. They would curse at him, even kick or punch him. Sometimes one of them would take the food they were eating, which they both were sick of, and smear it on the doll's face. "How do you like that stew, Harold?" he would ask. "Well, you'd better eat it, or else." Then the two men would howl with laughter. One night, after Thomas had wiped Harold's face with food, Harold grunted. "Did you hear that?" Alfred asked. "It was Harold," Thomas said. "I was watching him when it happened. I can't believe it." "How could he grunt?" Alfred asked. "He's just a sack of straw. It's not possible." "Let's throw him in the fire," said Thomas, "and that will be that." "Let's not do anything stupid," said Alfred. "We don't know what's going on. When we move the cows down, we'll leave him behind. For now, let's just keep an eye on him." So they left Harold sitting in a corner of the hut. They didn't talk to him or take him outside anymore. Now and then, the doll grunted, but that was all. After a few days, they decided there was nothing to be afraid of. Maybe a mouse or some insects had gotten inside Harold and were making those sounds. So Thomas and Alfred went back to their old ways. Each morning they put Harold out into the garden, and each night they brought him back into the hut. When they felt playful, they joked with him. When they felt mean, they treated him as badly as ever. Then one night, Alfred noticed something that frightened him. "Harold is growing," he said. "I was thinking the same thing," Thomas said. "Maybe it's just our imagination," Alfred replied. "We've been up here on this mountain too long." The next morning, while they were eating, Harold stood up and walked out of the hut. He climbed up on the roof and trotted back and forth like a horse on its hind legs. All day and all night he trotted like that. In the morning, Harold climbed down and stood in a far corner of the pasture. The men had no idea what he would do next. They were afraid. They decided to take the cows down into the valley that same day. When they left, Harold was nowhere in sight. They felt as if they had escaped a great danger and began joking and singing. But when they had gone only a mile or two, they realized they had forgotten to bring the milking stools. Neither one wanted to go back for them, but the stools would cost a lot to replace. "There really is nothing to be afraid of," they told one another. "After all, what could a doll do?" They drew straws to see which one would go back. It was Thomas. "I'll catch up with you," he said, and Alfred walked on toward the valley. When Alfred came to a rise in the path, he looked back for Thomas. He did not see him anywhere, but he did see Harold. The doll was on the roof of the hut again. As Alfred watched, Harold kneeled and stretched out a bloody skin to dry in the sun. Wow. That's a really, really dark ending for a story that was not that dark. Holy cow. So, wow. Alright, so they make this dummy in the image of this farmer they don't like, and it slowly starts coming to life. It grunts, and then it starts dancing on the roof, and when one of the guys goes for help, it apparently skins the friend and lays it out on the roof to be dried. Wow. Okay. That's pretty aggressive. That's a pretty aggressive... You know what? I need to rewatch that particular teaser. I remember the spider one. I remember the big girl one. I remember the big toe one. Oh, okay. Now I remember just a couple of brief flashes for the Harold one. Okay. Next, we're going to be going with The Dream. And this is the one with the fabulous artwork of the very pretty lady, which has been featured in a lot of articles regarding the teasers that we saw. The Dream. Lucy Morgan was an artist. She had spent a week painting in a small country town and decided that the next day she would move on. She would go to a village called Kingston. But that night, Lucy Morgan had a strange dream. She dreamed that she was walking up a dark, carved staircase and entered a bedroom. It was an ordinary room except for two things. The carpet was made up of large squares and looked like trapdoors. And each of the windows was fastened shut with big nails that stuck up out of the wood. In her dream, Lucy Morgan went to sleep in that bedroom. During the night, a woman with a pale face and black eyes and long black hair came into the room. She leaned over the bed and whispered,
"This is an evil place. Flee while you can."
When the woman touched her arm to hurry her along, Lucy Morgan awakened from her dream with a shriek. She lay awake the rest of the night, trembling. In the morning, she told her landlady that she had decided not to go to Kingston after all. "I can't tell you why," she said, "but I can't bring myself to go there." "And why don't you go to Dorset?" the landlady said. "It's a pretty town and it isn't too far." So Lucy Morgan went to Dorset. Someone told her she could find a room in the house at the top of the hill. It was a pleasant-looking house, and the landlady there, a plump, motherly woman, was nice as could be. "Let's look at the room," she said. "I think you'll like it." They walked up a dark, carved staircase, like the one in Lucy's dream. In these old houses, the staircases are all the same, Lucy thought. But when the landlady opened the door to the bedroom, it was the room from her dream, with the same carpet that looked like trapdoors and the same windows fastened with big nails. This is a coincidence, Lucy told herself. "How do you like it?" the landlady asked. "I'm not sure," she said. "Well, take your time," the landlady said. "I'll bring up some tea while you think about it." Lucy sat on the bed staring at the trapdoors and the big nails. Soon there was a knock on the door. "It's the landlady with tea," she thought. But it wasn't the landlady. It was the woman with her pale face and the black eyes and the long black hair. Lucy Morgan grabbed her things and fled. So, I don't know. That's not nearly as scary a story as I thought it could be. I mean, the teaser looks scarier than that. If that particular entity was coming after you the way the teaser looks like, that's way more unnerving than just her being behind the door and then you grabbing your stuff and running. So I'm excited to see how that one plays out as far as being an actual scary story. I think that could be more effective, but here we go. No one actually passed in this one. I'm guessing not that many people actually died in this book, as I'm going to be reading through these for the first time in a long time. So the red spot is the shortest of them all at just one page, with the picture here, which is not a blonde girl, which is what they picture in the teaser that we saw. But here we go, the red spot. While Ruth slept, a spider crawled across her face. It stopped for several minutes on her left cheek, then went on its way. "What is that red spot on my cheek?" she asked her mother in the morning. "It looks like a spider bite," her mother said. "It will go away, just don't scratch it." Soon the small red spot grew into a small red boil. "Look at it now," Ruth said. "It's getting bigger. It's sore." "That sometimes happens," her mother said. "It's coming to a head." In a few days the boil was even larger. "Look at it now," Ruth said. "It hurts and it's ugly." "We'll have the doctor look at it," her mother said. "Maybe it's infected." But the doctor could not see Ruth until the next day. That night, Ruth took a hot bath, and as she soaked herself, the boil burst. Out poured a swarm of tiny spiders from the eggs their mother had laid in her cheek. And that's it. That's the total of the story, the totality of the story. So I think there are definitely scarier ones, but those are pretty recognizable ones, and the spider leg coming out of the thing like we saw in the teaser is pretty aggressive. So I don't know. That's the 4 stories that we know so far. As we start to learn more, maybe I'll do another episode of this and read some more scary stories. Honestly, before I started The Hellbound Heart, which is what the first 3 episodes of this were, I was tempted to do this one and actually read it instead. But now this is as good a time as any to go through it. I will get back to the Hellbound Heart. I want to get back to my green screen in order to do that, but I thought this was a nice little background for you guys, showing off some of the horror comics I have and some of the figures and things like that, my little pop guys. So that's going to do it for this episode of Startling Storytime here on the Horror Show channel. That was the first installment of this Scary Stories in the Dark, I guess, dramatic reading? I don't know if you want to call it that or not, but those are the first 4 stories, the ones that are going to be featured, or that are being featured at least, in the first 4 teaser trailers for the upcoming film adaptation produced by Guillermo del Toro and directed by Andre Ovredal. So thank you guys very much for listening and watching. I greatly appreciate it. Until next time, I've been Cecil Laird, and remember, stay scared.